All right, so one thing we're going to talk about today is grip strength and why that is a pretty good indicator of how long you're going to live. And we'll talk about, kind of how they've come to that conclusion and how grip strength can relate to mortality and essentially how long that you'll live. So, if we are thinking about grip strength, this is more than just like having a strong grip, a strong hand. Grip strength, in essence, is the force that your hands, in combination with your forearms, generate to hold, pull, and essentially just control objects under a load, right? Now, this is not just one muscle when we're talking about like what is your grip strength comprised of. It involves a lot of different muscles, smaller muscles in the fingers, in the hands, in the forearms, but more specifically, if we're talking about like the three major movers, is and I'm going to get these all tongue tied up: flexor digitorum, the brachiordialis, the flexor carpi, and just any of those small intrinsic muscles inside of the hand in itself. Now, with having grip strength, having in the hands and the forearms both combined, there are three major demands, major things that you'll do with your current grip strength. So that's crush things, as in like squeezing somebody's hand very, very hard. Support, such as holding things over time, and this could be something like if you're doing an overhead, shoulder press, this, forearm and this hand strength. This is, holding the bar up and it's supporting your wrist joint. And then you have the pinch force as well too, which is the force that you can generate in between your thumb and your finger. And we'll talk about all those here in a minute as well too. Now, most people train all of these without ever directionally like targeting the grip. Like you can definitely do exercises that will like target your grip. One that is very common is people will get like a 5 gallon bucket of rice, right? Stick their hand in the bucket and just kind of twirl the rice around. That's going to help strengthen those hand muscles. Another one is like wrist curls, where if you get a barbell and you hold it in your wrist and you just torque it back and forth. Those are more or less direct grip strength exercises. Like farmer's carry is another one. But people don't directly train the grip, and this is where it can become one of the weakest links in the chain if we're seeing the whole body as like a chain in itself. So if we're talking about how grip strength is linked to longevity, at the end mortality, things of that nature too. And so for every 5 kilograms, according to out of this particular study, that you drop in grip strength, it's linked to a 17% higher mortality risk. So if you think about, any elderly person that right, they're typically at home, sitting down in their chair, watching TV, taking a nap, and reading a book. They're sedentary in an essence, right? They don't really do a whole lot. They have people helping them, throughout the day. Their grip strength is not that strong, right? They've quit working out, they've quit moving, and then you can kind of see that correlation. If their grip strength just drops off, significantly, that's where that higher mortality risk comes into play. So if you have a low grip strength, you have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease as well too, stroke and an early death. So if we're if we're wondering why the grip, why not something like how many steps did I get in a day, or like how like physically strong that I am. um, I mean, the grip in these studies, over multiple studies, decline the fastest amongst any other metrics that were measured in these studies. And so like it's just a good indication of like, well, if your strength is going down, then your grip surely has to go down, because you have to have the strength to grip and hold said weight, right? So it's kind of like it's the gateway. I don't want to say gateway drug, but it's kind of the gateway to losing that strength over time. Um, and so, like, if we're looking at lifting weights, grip strength, things like that in the gym, as you guys have probably all experienced at some point in time, when your grip fails, the lift typically falls off as well too. So your grip with whatever movement that you're doing, whether that's a curl, you know, a bench press, a pull up, a row, whatever the case may be, your grip to that machine, handle, whatever. This is the first a point of contact. And so, like, if you cannot physically hold on to that point of contact and your grip strength is weak, then your lifts are going to go down and your strength is not going to be as good as it could be. So, for instance, if you're doing a deadlift and you can easily, or your back can easily handle a 315 deadlift, but your grip strength is falling at 280, 85, right? Well, essentially you're leaving reps and pounds and just progression overall on the table just because your grip strength is now the limiting factor in a lot of those in a lot of those movers. And we'll talk about how we can correct that here in a minute. Now, if we're talking about like just grip in an essence, like we're not just talking about like you just gripping something, right? There's several different types of grip. So if you think about the crush grip, this is like squeezing a handle or a dumbbell fully closed in your hand. Like if you've ever seen those little like grip, strength things that you just squeeze, that's essentially you just doing a crush grip. You're just trying to squeeze that handle, that this little whatever they call this thing here. I've got one at the house here, but I have no idea what it's called. Until it's fully closed in your hand. And then if you think about the support grip, this is holding something heavy for a period of time without letting go. Now this could be something like if you're doing a dumbbell row, a bicep curl, like you are like fully grabbing, this handle, this attachment, whatever, but you're also using your hand along with your forearms as well to support whatever movement that you're doing as a whole. And then if we move on to the pinch grip, this is just your thumb pressing against your fingers with no palm contact. And then the last one is wrist stability. And again, this is something like if you're doing an overhead shoulder press, a barbell bench press, at this point, like your wrist is the most vulnerable part of this movement here, and that's where having a good grip strength, along with hand strength, forearm strength, both combined to be good grip strength, will come into play here as well too. Now, if you're curious, like, okay, well, how do I actually build the grip strength to, hopefully, live a longer life, right? A couple things that you can start to throw into your weekly routine. So, number one is going to be dead hangs. Now, this is something that you could do daily. This is something like if you have a pull-up bar at the house, anything that you can just grab a hold onto and just let everything relax, right? Now, for me, if I was doing something like this, I would try to not use any kind of straps. Obviously just try to use the grip strength that you have, and progressively work your way up to, having more and more and more maximal hang times. Kind of it's just the same as if you're progressively overloading in the gym. The longer that you're able to hang, the stronger that your grip strength is getting. Another one is going to be farmer's carries. This is something like if you grab a dumbbell, kettlebells, and you just like hold them down by your side, almost like you're carrying a bag of luggage, right? And you just walk, 40 meters, 45 seconds, like at the gym here in town, at 10 Star, they have like a little grass, like turf area, right? I used to do the farmer's carries. I would just go down and back, and that was one set, and that was one set for me. And then if you do that pinch technique, obviously you'll probably have to start out with like maybe even a 2.5 pound plate, a 5 pound plate, and progress up to the 10, the 25, maybe even a 45. But you essentially just want to like pinch the plate, hold it for 30 to 60 seconds, rest for 30 to 60 seconds, and then go again. And then try to always use as much weight as you can without straps until you get to the point to where that you need straps. So like for instance, if you ever see me doing any kind of like back movers, like I try to not use my straps through my warm up sets and maybe even on like my first top set. If my grip strength is still fresh and I can still like handle the weight that I'm trying to use without my grip strength failing first, I'm going to do that for as long as I can, as I can. Um, one thing I say that has helped me is if I decide to not use straps for whatever reason that day, and I don't really know like what this particular technique is called, but I'll essentially just like grip the bar, but I'll take my thumb and I'll put it on one of my nails. And for some reason, when that's locked in, like that's not coming off. Like it would almost have to pull my fingernail off for that grip to slip. And I know that sounds dumb and it sounds like it hurts, but it really doesn't because if it's wrapped around the bar, I'm essentially just putting pressure into whatever finger that I'm pushing onto that nail, and it's pushing into the bar. So the harder that I grip, the harder that it pushes into the bar, if that makes sense. And now at some point that fails and I have to get straps because my forearms get tight, my hands start to ache. So like that's not something that you can just you know like or replace straps with, but it's a good um, kind of alternative method if you're trying to progress as far as you can without actually having a strap hooked to your wrist, and essentially like you're taking the hand out of the equation. So at the end of the day, like your grip is a report card of how your body is holding up. Essentially, I mean, if you was to think about how strong that your grip strength was, if you were a young 18-year-old male as comparison to an 85-year-old male, right? Grip strength is probably going to be two vastly different sides of the spectrum here. It just correlates as far as like once that grip strength starts to go down and you start to slow down as you age, um, that again that grip strength is just a good inclination. Like, all right, this is kind of the gateway that starts to slow things down first, and like the downstream effect of that grip strength going away is going to, I don't want to say lead to your death because that just sounds dumb, but it will, obviously slow you down a little bit. And we all know, things in motion, continue to stay in motion, and the opposite is true as well too. That's honestly why I think, if you see a lot of older people in the gym, like there's a gentleman that goes to my gym, he's 88 years old. He walks at the gym 5 days a week, lifts weights in some very small capacity 5 times a week. And he's told me several times that he feels better um, right now than he did, 10, 15 years ago. So again, like if things start to slip and you notice that your grip strength is going down, it can be corrected. You just have to start training it directly. And you can do that, with the things like the dead hang, the farmer's carries, the plate pinchers, and just trying not to use straps as often. So with that, does anybody have any questions or anything you want to add? Um, I know for me personally, I have gotten the question in the past about what kind of straps to use, and I should have brought mine inside. But um, one metric or one type of wrist strap is like the old. It's kind of like it's just like a, I don't know how to explain it. It just wraps around your wrist, and you have like a piece of rope that comes out, right? And you essentially just wrap the bar with that, and as you crank the bar, it gets tighter. That's one of my favorite ones because the more that you turn it, the tighter it gets, and it does not let go. Now it can be dangerous if you're doing a movement to where like again you cannot let go of it. So like if if the weight's going to fall, you're going to go with it. Another one is a thing called like a Versa grip, to where it wraps around your wrist, and it has like a little leather pad here that you can wrap around the bar, and then you can twist and it gets tighter. But if you let your hand go, that thing comes off. So there's several different kinds of straps out there, but at the end of the day, you should try to use straps as limited as possible until you get to the point to where like, all right, I physically can't do my working set because my grip strength just isn't matching. And that's going to be the case. I mean, if you have a very strong back, your back is not going to be I mean, your forearms will never match your back strength if you're somebody who's actively in the gym, bodybuilding, powerlifting, things of that nature. So that's just something to keep in mind as well too.
Do you know if there's like any benefit with building grip strength and like a correlation to like, I don't know, things like carpal tunnel and stuff like that, where it like affects the hand at all?
Yeah, that's
I don't
honestly
know if you came across anything.
No, but that's honestly a good question. I mean, I would assume, the more that you train the grip, the less likely that would be. But then kind of on the flip side, we know that carpal tunnel comes from overuse of the
Mhm.
wrist and things like that. So, and and the swelling of those,
Yeah.
tunnels. So I don't know. To me, it thinks as if your forearms get bigger to a degree, and I don't know, it causes those tunnels to be more compressed. It might
Yeah.
make it worse. I don't know, but it also
Mm.
could make them more resilient.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see anything about that.
Hmm.
But that's a good question for sure. Anybody else got anything to add or ask? And if you don't have a pair of straps, go to the gym front desk and ask, can you borrow a pair of straps? People leave straps in the gym all the time. There's like oh God, the things that you put Christmas decorations in, like like the totes or whatever. There's a tote
Mhm.
at the gym that I go to that is slam full of nothing but straps. People just drop them, they leave them. So if you're curious and you want to actually try a pair of straps, just go to the front desk at your gym. I'm sure that they'll have a drawer full of them somewhere. So
Carolina had some new ones not that long ago that like I don't know where they got them from, but they had all sorts of them at one point.
yeah, I think I remember one time he was giving a bunch of them away. I think
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. And there's been times where I've lost mine, and I'm like, all right, well, I don't have any. I'm gonna go up to the front and borrow a pair until I get a pair back. So, that's if you want to try some without having to order any. But I mean, even if you do a good set of grips on Amazon, $5 to $20, they're not that expensive. Um, but anyway, if nobody else has anything, we'll roll from here. And if you guys have any questions outside of that about grip strength stuff, just let me know. Um, and yeah, I hope you guys have a good day, and we'll go from there.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
See y'all. Y'all be good. See ya.